Hello and welcome to the second part of the Wacky World of Tex Avery Search for the Worst Cartoon, in which I will go over the final 3 segments of the show. If you haven't watched the first part where I went over the first 4 segments, then you have to watch that video in order to understand this video a lot better. This is a 2-part review, and so in order to better understand everything that I say in this video, you have to watch part 1. For those of you who have already watched part 1, let us proceed forward. Our next cartoon is Freddy the Fly, and Jesus man, I thought Einstein had a visually unappealing character design, but look at Freddy over here, what the hell is this supposed to be? Okay, to be fair, he doesn't look as bad or as visually unappealing in the actual cartoon when compared to on the title screen, but still. Chat, am I crazy, or does Freddy over here look like that one character from that like French cartoon that's like really popular? Is something cockroaches, I don't know. I think there's like a cat character in that cartoon, and Freddy over here looks like that cat character. I'm gonna try and pull up an image of this character on screen so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about to showcase that I am not crazy. Anyways, the show follows Freddy, who is a fly. Wowzers. And this rich woman named Helena. Okay, so I was in the middle of editing this segment of the video when I decided to do a little bit of research, and it turns out I got this character's name completely wrong. As it turns out, the rich woman in Freddy the Fly is named Amanda, not Helena. I don't know where the hell I got Helena from. I don't know why I decided to call her this, but whatever. That's what I accidentally referred to her as throughout this segment. And I gotta be real with y'all, I don't feel like re-recording this entire segment just so I could fix this mistake, okay? Some things are just not worth it. It's the wacky world of Tex Avery. Who gives a shit? To be honest. And throughout the show, Freddy bothers Helena. No, I am not going to make the obvious pun. Screw you. And surprise, surprise, this is every single fucking episode of Freddy the Fly. This is literally the exact same thing as Pt.2. Like, story-wise, I see no differences at all. Pt.2 bothers Dan. Freddy the Fly bothers Helena. It's the same damn thing. Hey, can I copy your homework? Sure, but change a few details about it so that it doesn't look like you copied it. Alright fam, thanks. And this is what we get. Now because the storylines for both of these cartoons are more or less the exact same, a lot of what I said about Pt.2 could also apply to Freddy the Fly. The problem is not the basic concept of, oh, Freddy the Fly bothers Helena. The problem is that they use this plot for every single episode of Freddy the Fly. It's not funny. It stops being funny after a while. I guess it's like okay-ish, you know, maybe it's like a little bit funny for the first episode, but then by the time you get to episode 5, it's like, God, can they come up with other ideas for this cartoon? They could have episodes where Freddy the Fly is bothering other people instead of this one woman. One of the episodes that I watched for Freddy the Fly involves him and Helena attending this like dinner party at a cruise or whatever, where you have all these like rich and fancy people. And I thought to myself, oh damn, maybe they're gonna do something a little bit different with this one. They're gonna have Freddy the Fly be a nuisance to everyone at this party, and instead it's only primarily Helena that gets bothered. You have the opportunity to make the episode potentially funnier. You have the opportunity to add a little bit of variety to this show with this one episode, and you completely screw it up. You just throw it out the window. Alternatively, they could have episodes where Freddy the Fly just doesn't bother anyone. He doesn't bother Helena. He doesn't bother like anyone like that. We get to see like life as a fly. Now, in all fairness, I don't think Freddy the Fly has the same sort of wasted potential as Pompey Pete, where, I'm sorry, I cannot get over this. They wasted a potentially funny premise. Someone from the Pompeii era, from like ancient Pompeii, who ends up in like modern day New York or whatever, and they do nothing with that premise because they're too busy focusing on this one specific plot line, and they decide, yeah, let's have every single episode of this sub-cartoon focus on this plot line. Freddy the Fly doesn't have anything like that. Freddy is just kind of whatever as a character. I mean, okay, I will acknowledge this show is a tiny bit based because, you know, Helena is like an extremely rich woman, and you have Freddy the Fly constantly bothering her, you know, that is a tiny bit based, I will admit that, because, you know, eat the rich and all that. But to have that be the premise for every single episode, it gets really old really quickly. They do introduce like other ideas with these two characters, but the basic concept of Freddy the Fly bothers Helena. It stays exactly the same. It didn't take long before I decided, no, there's no point in watching any episodes of Freddy the Fly. There's no point in watching that many episodes of it, because I already know exactly how the episodes will turn out. Literally, I could just watch like the first few seconds of an episode, and already I can get an idea of what the episode is going to be about in my head. Now, in all fairness, something that I have to bring up is that these sub-cartoons are extremely short. Each episode of The Wacky World of Tex Avery consists of 3 shorts from any of the 7 sub-cartoons, and the overall runtime is 22 minutes long. However, each individual short is only 7 minutes long, so I probably shouldn't complain all that much about the repetitive nature of these cartoons, and yet I do, because there's 40 f***ing episodes of this show. If I could, I would manually count how many segments are there for each of the 7 cartoons to see which one has the most, which one has the least. You know, I'm not gonna do that because that would be a waste of time. But then actively watching more than like 5 of these sub-cartoon episodes would also be a waste of time. What's the point in spending a lot of time watching the different episodes of Freddy the Fly when I already know it's going to be the same crap as the previous episode? I could just watch the first few seconds and already I could get a good idea of what the episode would be about. And then I skim through the episode and lo and behold, my prediction ends up being correct. And also, unlike with Pompey Pete, where most of the time I felt like the whole Pompey Pete bothers Dan stuff can get unnecessarily kind of mean-spirited. I hate to be that cartoon YouTuber, but I do have to say it. There you go. And I'm not sure if that same criticism can be applied to this show, because honestly, I don't really like Freddy the Fly as a character, nor do I like Helena. I find them both to be pretty damn annoying. Not insufferable, mind you, but still obnoxious nonetheless. This should be a cakewalk to review something like this, because it's very repetitive, and there's not a whole lot for me to say about it. And instead, it feels needlessly frustrating. It's like I'm stressing out, trying to find things to say about this cartoon, positive or negative, but it just won't give me any material to work with because of its extremely repetitive nature. I don't think this show is as bad as Pompey Pete, even though it is the exact same thing. I don't know what it is, but there's something about this show that makes it slightly more tolerable than Pompey Pete, which I'm aware is ironic because I literally just said I don't like either of these two characters, and yet I feel like there's something in this show that makes it slightly more tolerable than Pompey Pete. I don't know what it is, but it is a little bit more tolerable. However, I will not deny that this is for sure in the lower tier of the ranking for these sub-cartoons. And so with that said, we move on to the 6th and penultimate cartoon in this collection, Maurice and Mooch. this is literally fucking Tom and Jerry. Like, this is the exact same plot as Tom and Jerry. I am not joking at all. I don't know which one is Maurice, and I don't know which one is Mooch, and to be honest, I really don't care all that much. You have this Fox character, who is the Tom of the show, and then you have this baby chick, who is the Jerry of the show. And just like that, it becomes instantly obvious what this show is about, to the point where it feels almost redundant for me to explain what it's about, and yet I feel obligated to explain the plot. Every episode of this show follows the fox trying to capture and eat the baby chick, in the same way Tom would try to capture and eat Jerry. And naturally, in the same way Jerry often outsmarts Tom, this baby chick outsmarts the fox. It's Tom and Jerry, except it's not very good. It's not the worst thing ever, but again, there isn't a whole lot for me to say about it when this is such a blatant ripoff of a cartoon that already has a very simplistic storyline. Once again, every episode is exactly the same. Every episode is repetitive. You know, now this just makes me question, Tom and Jerry is repetitive as well when you think about it. Like, almost every version of Tom and Jerry, almost every cartoon is the exact same thing. It's the exact same storyline. So how come Tom and Jerry works, but then this doesn't? Why do I like Tom and Jerry despite the fact that it's repetitive, and yet I don't like this because it's repetitive? It's the same thing with Looney Tunes, you know, you look at like Wile E. Coyote versus the Roadrunner. Every single one of those shorts is the same thing. Why are those good, but then this isn't? Why are the Sylvester and Tweety Bird shorts good, but then this isn't? I don't know what it is. There's just something about this that's missing. A lot of these episodes, in addition to being repetitive, are also incredibly predictable, and that's in part because of how repetitive these episodes are. There's an episode where the fox pretends to be a babysitter for the baby chick, obviously in an attempt to eat him. In all of these episodes, the baby chick is completely oblivious to the fox's true intentions, which, I don't care, it's still a Tom and Jerry ripoff, but you know, that's something I could point out, I guess. Anyways, the fox pretends to be a babysitter for the baby chick in an attempt to eat him, and obviously that ends up failing. And then I watch another episode of this show, and you know how earlier I brought up how I could watch the first few seconds of an episode for any of these cartoons, and I would already understand what the episode is about? Yeah. That's how I felt with this following episode. I watched this episode of the show where this baby chick is about to attend his first day of school, and literally, only a few seconds into the episode, only a few seconds after that plot line was established, I immediately knew what the episode was gonna be about. This was going to be the exact same thing as the babysitter episode, except instead of pretending to be a babysitter, the fox pretends to be a teacher. Besides that, it's the same damn thing. Now, to my surprise, that ended up not being the case. Yes, this episode is exactly the same as the babysitter episode. However, instead of pretending to be a babysitter, the fox doesn't pretend to be a teacher. No, he pretends to be the school bus driver. A majority of the episode is him trying to eat the baby chick while pretending to be this bus driver. And so all kinds of wacky shenanigans ensue. Well, okay then, my bad. So as it turns out, this show isn't as formulaic or as predictable as I thought. My mistake. Actually, I just remembered, near the end of the episode, the fox does pretend to be a teacher. Never mind. Again, this isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, and yet, it is nowhere near as funny as it probably should be. which, in fairness, for the case of this specific cartoon, this could be because, it's a blatant ripoff of an already existing cartoon. But I just imagine an alternate universe where these are Tom and Jerry episodes. The storylines remain exactly the same, but instead of the baby chick, you have Jerry, and instead of the fox, you have Tom. And instead of coming out in the late 90s, it comes out in like the 40s or so. And instead of being, whatever, it's okay, it ends up being absolutely hilarious. It's considered a classic. I'm genuinely so confused, like, why is this not that good, but then Tom and Jerry is beloved? What makes Tom and Jerry different from this? I could make the obvious joke that like, oh, it's because Tom and Jerry is good, but then it's like, this isn't even that bad either. This is watchable. I could sit through this. The problem is, there is nothing to really say about it. I guess it's different in the sense that I'm not making a negative review of Tom and Jerry or anything like that. I'm not trying to make a negative review of Tom and Jerry. I'm not trying to find anything like bad to say about Tom and Jerry. Maybe that's the difference right there. Who knows, honestly? Who knows? And so we move on to the 7th and final cartoon in this collection, Power Pooch. And let me tell y'all something. I'm gonna go into far more detail about this show than in any of the previous 6 cartoons. And you're gonna find out why. You're gonna find out why. So in the theme song for the show, we have this superhero that appears. Who is this superhero? The show never explains. He's just a generic superhero and that's it. And while he's flying in outer space, his shoe falls off and lands on this dog bowl. This dog licks the shoe and becomes the titular Power Pooch. And so throughout the show, Power Pooch, alongside his tiny kitten sidekick, Little Buddy, yes, that is his actual name, work together to stop crime happening all around the city. Now, something interesting that I found out about is one of the final episodes of the Wacky World of Tex Avery has a Power Pooch short that goes over the real origins of how Power Pooch got this shoe. So I guess there existed this planet that had superheroes in it. And so you have this superhero family with a superhero dog, a superhero cat, a superhero fish, that sort of thing. I guess the dog, cat, and fish all get into an argument about steak, like they all want a steak and they keep fighting for it. And then the cat accidentally launches a doomsday device that will destroy the entire planet. Luckily, there is an escape hatch, however, there's only room to fit in one person. Everyone in the superhero family tries to make it into this escape hatch. However, shortly after the escape hatch departs into the air, everyone except for the dog falls out of it and the planet explodes and everyone dies. And so the dog travels millions of light years away from the destroyed planet and onto Earth, in which the escape hatch conveniently lands next to Power Pooch. The door opens up, we see the skull of the dog, and Power Pooch takes the shoe from it, believing it to be a new chew toy. And the rest is history, as Power Pooch would put it. This was something that I had no idea about until shortly before I started recording this segment. I just had a gut feeling. I had a hunch that there was an episode of this that went into further detail about this backstory. Now, the validity of this backstory when compared to the theme song's backstory is questionable, it's debatable, but I think the last thing any of us would want to do is get into a debate as to which one is the canon backstory for Power Pooch of all things. Also, fine, I'll address the elephant in the room. The big giant PP in front of Power Pooch. Jesus Christ, I worded that awfully. I apologize. The first time I watched this show, I made a note to myself that, like, holy crap, they had to know. They had to know. I didn't know if this was intentional or not, but if this was unintentional, then that just made things even funnier. Considering the fact that throughout the show, the tiny kitten sidekick frequently refers to Power Pooch as PP, there's a part of me that thinks, yeah, they knew this was intentional. Which, I mean, you know, it's still funny if it's intentional, but it's even funnier when it's unintentional. And knowing that it's most likely intentional makes it less funny. You get what I'm saying? Now, for whatever reason, it would be a while before I got my first Power Pooch cartoon. I would binge watch all of the episodes up to the first one with Power Pooch in it, and I would just be wondering, where the hell is Power Pooch? When is Power Pooch gonna show up? I would have to sit through different shorts for the Tex Avery cowboy cartoon, for Pt.2, for Freddy the Fly, etc. And never once would Power Pooch show up. It didn't take long before I became very accustomed to these other 6 cartoons. I only watched like 3 episodes of Freddy the Fly, and it felt like, yep, I knew enough about Freddy the Fly. I was now familiar with Freddy the Fly. I watched like 2 episodes of Maurice and Mooch, and it was like, yep, I already know what Maurice and Mooch is about. I already have an idea of it, and I'm just waiting impatiently for when Power Pooch would show up. For whatever reason, it wouldn't be until episode 8, that's when Power Pooch finally shows up. That's when we finally get the first episode of Power Pooch. Which, admittedly, you know, that isn't that far into the show. That's still very early on. This show only lasted 65 episodes. However, because of the very repetitive nature of a lot of these cartoons, it felt much longer than it actually was. But nevertheless, I finally get to Power Pooch, and so I start watching it. So in the first episode, you have this purple cat as the villain, who manages to obtain the magic shoe, gaining the same superpowers that Power Pooch has, in which for whatever reason, the cat's head is purple, but then his body is orange, and I have no idea why. I assume this is an animation error, but I don't think that's the case, because number one, this would be a pretty big fucking animation error to just straight up get the color of a character's body wrong, especially when you get the color of the character's head correct. And number two, every scene that this character appears in his super form, he has a purple head with an orange body, which makes me doubt that it's an animation error. But then that makes me even more confused as to why it's like this. What is up with this color scheme? I don't get it. But that's beside the point. Throughout the episode, it is a constant back and forth between Power Pooch and this cat to try and get the shoe back. And I'm not gonna lie, I find it to be kind of mildly entertaining. I've previously established this show is able to make me laugh from time to time, but watching this specific short, it was like, hey, this is kind of good actually. The reason all of this started in the first place is because Power Pooch and Little Buddy come across this cat about to eat a mouse, in which they both save the mouse. And so as a form of revenge, the cat steals the magic shoe and gets powers himself. And then it becomes a back-to-back fight between Power Pooch and the cat to see who can be stronger. You have the both of them grabbing all kinds of random giant things and hitting each other with them. Power Pooch grabs a whole ship and hits the cat with it. The cat grabs an asteroid and hits Power Pooch with it. You know, that sort of thing. They grow up into the clouds, and then the mouse appears behind them, and he is much stronger than either one, and he launches the cat into orbit. And I'm not gonna lie, it's like, this is actually really damn funny. It's absurd and wacky enough for it to be funny. I was surprised watching it. I was like, wait, this is actually really funny. What the hell? I actually enjoyed this, I'm not gonna lie. I finished watching this first episode pleasantly surprised. However, I obviously knew I had to watch more of the show in order to properly review it. And that's when my fears came in, that this show would be formulaic and repetitive, just like a lot of the other cartoons in this collection. Every episode of Pompeii Pete is the same. Every episode of Freddy the Fly is the same. Every episode of Genghis and Connie is the same. Every episode of Maurice and Mooch is the same. Why would Pooch be exempt from this? Why would Pooch be the exception? But at the same time, I thought to myself, no, that can't be the case at all, because this is supposed to be a superhero cartoon. When you think of superheroes, obviously you think of supervillains as well. You know, you look at Batman, for example. Batman has all kinds of different supervillains. You have the Joker, Harley Quinn, the Penguin, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, Two-Face, Bane, Catwoman, Mr. Freeze, the list goes on. Imagine if every single Batman comic, every single Batman movie, every single episode of every single Batman show had the Joker as the villain, and that's it. No Penguin, no Harley Quinn, no Riddler, nothing. Just the Joker, and that's it. Yeah, that would get really f***ing boring really f***ing quickly. And so I went into the second episode of Pooch, and I was thinking to myself, I swear to God, if this William Afton cat appears in this episode, I'm going to lose it. I would immediately stop watching Pooch after that. I don't care. I wouldn't even bother giving it a chance. Instead, Pooch ended up doing the unthinkable. In the second episode, Pooch and Little Buddy are trying to stop this runaway bus that doesn't have any driver at all. However, something that Pooch is comedically oblivious to is the fact that nobody on this bus is real. It is a bus full of mannequins. And so throughout the episode, the two of them try and stop this bus. Pooch frequently gets distracted by several different things, and again, I found it to be surprisingly decent. I was like, hey, you know, this is kind of enjoyable. This is kind of good, actually. And the main thing that I took note of was the fact that it felt like a different episode from the first episode. It didn't feel like a rehash of the first episode, but with a few minor differences. The William Afton cat that appeared in the first episode does not appear in this second episode at all, and that completely surprised me. And then I kept watching more and more episodes, and I would just become more and more surprised. This thing actually has variety. None of the episodes are like each other. This show isn't formulaic or repetitive. Holy crap. Not only that, but I also found it to be a surprisingly pretty decent, fun little show. Maybe I like this more than the other 6 cartoons just because it's the only one that actually has variety in the episode storylines, but to be honest, I watched this and I think, yeah, I kind of like this. This isn't that bad. I would even go as far as to say this is not Search for the Worst cartoon material whatsoever. This doesn't even come close. This is just straight up a good cartoon. If this was its own thing, completely separated from the other 6 cartoons, I think it would have this underrated gem reputation. It would be seen as this like cult classic 90s Saturday morning cartoon. This feels like something that would air on Nickelodeon in the 90s, you know? It's like you put this alongside Cat Dog or The Angry Beavers or Rocko's Modern Life, and it would fit in perfectly. It would not stand out whatsoever. I believe I mentioned before the Tex Avery cowboy cartoon was the sub-cartoon that I watched the most episodes for, but I think it's actually Pooch that I watched the most episodes for. It's the only one of the 7 cartoons that I found to be really entertaining. Everything else ranged from, it's fine to Pompey Pete, and then you have this, which is like surprisingly a pretty good show. I like it. It's enjoyable. If I ever have kids, I don't see any reason not to show them this cartoon. Now, not all of the episodes of Pooch are winners. There are a few duds here and there, and I'm sure if I watched more episodes of this, I would probably find an episode that's just straight up bad. But for the most part, I found this to be a pretty decent 90s cartoon. Mainly just because of the fact that there's variety in the episodes. Every episode is its own thing. There are a few episodes that have the same villains as another episode. For example, I watched one episode that has this anthropomorphic hydrant and bone as the main villains, and then these two would appear in another episode. But it's perfectly fine, because it's not like they appear in every single episode, and I think the situation relating to Power Pooch and these two characters are different enough in the two episodes for it to be okay. There's enough of a difference story-wise that I'm okay with these two characters appearing in more than one episode. This isn't like with Freddy the Fly, where the entire plot of every single episode is just Freddy the Fly bothers Amanda. See, I got her name correct. Are you happy now? And there's no variety at all in the episode storylines. Everything is the exact same across the episodes. There's nothing to make it interesting. There's nothing to spice it up. There's nothing to keep it fresh. It's just the same crap every single episode. No, this thing has variety. The purple cat that appears in the first episode, I never saw him again in any of the subsequent episodes that I watched. I'm sure he appears in another episode of the show besides the first one. However, I never watched whatever other cartoon this character's appeared in. Now, something very interesting that I want to bring up that I didn't even know about until I started working on this segment was that there is a banned episode, a banned segment of Power Pooch. The episode is called Fly Like a Beagle, and it involves a Power Pooch and little buddy trying to stop these two terrorists disguised as stewardess who are on board a plane as they plan to deliberately crash the plane. Yeah, I think it is incredibly obvious why this episode was eventually pulled. You know, there was a certain event that happened in the early 2000s and yeah, I think you get where I'm going with this. Now, from what I've heard, this segment was lost to media at one point. There was a Spanish dub of the episode that was available, but the English version was completely lost. However, the English version would eventually be found in, I believe, 2024, or maybe even this year in 2025, I'm not sure. I ended up watching the entire segment, and holy crap, you know, I can't believe this, man. This came out before 9/11, obviously. This was like 1997. 9/11 happened. I mean, we all know when it fucking happened, alright? It's redundant for me to even explain it. This show was long over by the time 9/11 happened, and yet it strikes me as being incredibly bizarre to watch given what would happen only a few years later. There's a scene in the episode where Power Pooch and little buddy crash into the front window of the pilot's, I don't know, the cockpit, that's what it's called. I don't know how the hell I could forget such a memorable name. And the two pilots get sucked out, and so for most of the episode, Power Pooch puts little buddy in charge to control the plane, in which, for comedic purposes, he's unable to. And not once in the entire episode are the two pilots that were sucked out ever acknowledged. Spoiler alert, but yeah, obviously Power Pooch and little buddy end up saving the day. That's not really surprising at all. That doesn't exactly change the fact that there were still two casualties on this whole thing, you know? They saved the day, but there were still two people that lost their lives, and it is never once acknowledged at all. I might be overthinking this, but like, you know, when you consider the reason why this episode was banned, it is a little extra strange, I'm not gonna lie. It is something to think about. And then you have all of these different scenes where the plane is flying very low around this city, going through different buildings, not crashing into them obviously, but going through them. And it is wild to watch them just because of, like, I know again this came out before 9/11, but it's still really shocking to see. There's a quick 2-second joke involving the Statue of Liberty, and the moment I saw it, I was like, holy shit, there is no way. There is no f***ing way, man. And what do you know, there they are. There's the twin towers in the background just like that. This is some insane foreshadowing right here, unintentionally. Words cannot even begin to describe how flabbergasted I was watching this episode. I already knew that Pooch was easily the most interesting of the 7 sub-cartoons, but I didn't need a banned episode that would unintentionally predict 9/11 to further prove my point. Something else that I want to go over with this show, and it's not just for Pooch, but it's for the show in its entirety. Apparently, at one point, this show was lost media, or at least a portion of it was lost media. This show lasted for 65 episodes. In 2013, there was a Volume 1 DVD that was released that contains 40 of the 65 episodes. However, there was never a Volume 2 that was released. There was never a home media release for the remaining 25 episodes of the show. And so, for a long time, the remaining 25 episodes were thought to be lost media. It wouldn't be until the show started rerunning this year in 2025 on a network called Pt.2, where the remaining 25 episodes of the show would air for the first time in a very long time, thereby making the entire show found. Yes, this year, 2025. As a matter of fact, the aforementioned episode going over the origin of how Pooch found this magical shoe, that was among the segments that were part of the lost 25 episodes. I was scrolling through Wikipedia, going through like the synopsis for each episode, because I was curious to see if there was an episode that went into more detail about Pooch's backstory. And indeed there was. And what are the odds that it ends up being part of the lost 25 episodes? And what are the odds as well that these lost 25 episodes would be found? And what are the odds as well that these episodes would be found this year in 2025? All of a sudden, I have regained hope that these two can be found in their entirety. And that's about all that I want to say for the wacky world of Tex Avery. I ran a poll asking what people wanted to see me cover next on the search for the worst cartoon, and this was one of the options, and lo and behold, this show ended up winning. And so I was curious to see what the deal was with this show, because I was aware it didn't exactly have a very good reputation. Every now and then I would see people put this on different worst cartoons lists, calling this a disgrace to Tex Avery, that sort of thing. And then I actually watched the show myself and I think, it's fine. There's nothing really awful about it. I wouldn't exactly call this a good show. I wouldn't call it a great show, but it's also not a terrible show either. Even at its absolute worst, it's only like a 3 out of 10, which is, I mean, that's far from a good score, but, you know, that's not 0 out of 10. Again, I am not familiar at all with Tex Avery's work. Maybe if I was more familiar with his work, I would hate this a lot more. But as it currently stands, I just look at this show, and I think of it as being, it's just your standard typical 90s cartoon, you know? One of the many cartoons of the 90s that tried to copy the wacky, zany, surreal style of humor that Ren and Stimpy pioneered. For the most part, I found the show to be perfectly fine. However, I didn't find it to be all that funny. For something that's supposed to be non-stop laughs 24/7, I was mostly stone-faced watching this. I didn't really find it to be all that hilarious. Tolerable, but not hilarious. I want to imagine if these were all like different cartoons that the actual Tex Avery would make back in like the 50s or something, the 40s, I don't know. Maybe they would be a lot better. Maybe they would be genuinely hilarious. Maybe if Maurice and Mooch or Freddy the Fly or whatever, if these came out in the 50s from the actual Tex Avery himself, they would probably be hilarious. They would probably be a lot funnier. And yet, the late 90s setting for these shows, I think, prevent them from being as funny as they should be, if that makes sense. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of the fact that this is just your typical 90s cartoon. This is just your typical Ren and Stimpy wannabe cartoon. There's nothing to make this show feel different or fresh. There's nothing to make it stand out from a lot of the other Ren and Stimpy wannabe cartoons in the 90s. This is just your typical generic 90s cartoon, and that's it. And admittedly, there are a few instances in the show, particularly in Pt.2, where I feel like the wacky zaniness of the show can get a little too much, where it just feels like this is like a sugar cartoon. It's just pure sugar as a cartoon. It's wacky, it's goofy, it's zany, but it's all too much, you know? It's like consuming too much sugar. It might be good in small doses, but too much of it is not a good thing at all. Are there any good things that I can say about this show? Yeah. You know, I could think of a few redeeming qualities. I could definitely think of a few redeeming qualities. Okay, being serious, there are a couple good things about this show. I like the art, I like the animation, I think they both look good. There are a few animation errors here and there, and I don't really like the character designs for Einstein or Freddy the Fly, but besides that, I think the art is good, I think the animation is good. Every now and then, there are funny jokes in the show. Every now and then, there are jokes that can make me laugh watching the show. The thing that surprises me the most about this cartoon is that there is very little toilet humor to be found. This feels like the kind of show that would be filled to the brim with non-stop toilet humor. And yet, in the many episodes that I would watch for this show, in the many different segments that I would sit through, very rarely would I come across toilet humor. Very rarely would there be a fart joke or a poop joke or anything like that. And that surprises me a lot because this feels like the kind of show that would have a lot of toilet humor, but it doesn't. And so I am counting that as a massive positive right there. Power Pooch is peak. I don't care what anyone says. Power Pooch is the GOAT. I don't care. You can say whatever you want to say about the other 6 cartoons, but Power Pooch, that's the GOAT right there. I don't care. That's a underrated gem of a cartoon right there. Like, I'm telling y'all, you make this its own separate thing, you make the episodes longer and more fleshed out, you air it on Nickelodeon alongside the Angry Beavers and Cat Dog, and it would be perfect, just like that. If I were to rank all 7 sub-cartoons from best to worst, this would be my ranking. Power Pooch is obviously the best one. Power Pooch is the GOAT. Power Pooch is peak. There's nothing that I can say about it that I haven't already said. Second place is the Tex Avery cowboy cartoon, which I find to be decent for the most part. It's not exactly one that I would ever come back to, but you know, I liked it, I guess. It was alright. It was tolerable. It was decent. It has a few funny moments here and there, but it's nothing super special. It is exactly what I think of when I think generic typical 90s cartoon. Not bad, but also nothing special. Third place is Maurice and Mooch. This is literally Tom and Jerry, except not as good. And there's nothing really for me to say about it. But on the bright side, this means that the show is mostly harmless and inoffensive, so third place it goes. Fourth place goes to Genghis and Connie, which I feel like is just Maurice and Mooch again, which in turn was just Tom and Jerry, so I guess this is Tom and Jerry as well. I'm not gonna lie, I kinda get Wile E. Coyote versus the Roadrunner vibes from this more than I do Tom and Jerry vibes. Tom and Jerry vibes feel different from Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner vibes. I don't know why, they just kind of do. Yeah, there's nothing really I can say about Genghis and Connie. It's a nothing burger. Fifth place goes to Einstein, a mostly black cartoon. Sixth place goes to Freddy the Fly, which kind of sucks to be honest. And seventh place goes to Pt.2, which is, well, Pt. I find it amusing the fact that the best and worst sub-cartoons both have a PP as their initials. Now that, I'm sure, was unintentional, and that allows for it to be a lot funnier. Overall, I would rank the Wacky World of Tex Avery fairly high up on the Search for the Worst Cartoon ranking list. There's nothing particularly amazing or noteworthy about it, besides Power Pooch, of course. It is unfortunately not a laugh-out-loud gut-buster like it desperately wants to be. I was mostly stone-faced while watching it. A lot of the sub-cartoons suffer from being very formulaic and repetitive, and some of the sub-cartoons I would argue are in brain rot before brain rot. But when the show hits, I'd say it hits. There are moments where the show can be pretty damn good, or at the very least okay, at the very least decent, tolerable, whatever. It's far from the best thing that I've covered on the search for the worst cartoon, but it's also far from the worst thing that I've covered. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see y'all next time. Adios!